Benny Andersson struggled with a more severe issue when writing ABBA's greatest hits. He remained silent for 20 years. Finally, in 2011, at the age of 64, he revealed the truth. He couldn't accomplish anything without drinking during ABBA's heyday. At every Grammy, Globe Tour, and Blockbuster song, he was intoxicated. However, it wasn't even the most difficult thing to say. He also discussed why songs like The Winner Takes It All are so painful. They weren't merely depressing tales. He avoided having actual conversations by using them. On December 16, 1946, Benny Andersson was born in Stockholm's Vasastan area, but that was no ordinary birth. Music began to play as soon as he entered the family room. Although his father, Gösta, was a construction engineer, he had a deep passion for music and accordion playing. Benny's grandpa Ephraim was even more significant. He played Swedish country music and the accordion at family get-togethers. At home, music was more than simply background noise. It was the major occasion. Listening to tunes that had been played for more than a century helped Benny learn how to play the instrument. No one, not even Benny, was aware of the deep connection to Swedish folk music at the time, but it would later be used by people all over the world in pop hits. All of that changed when Benny turned 6. At that time, he received his first accordion. After a few days, it would have been pushed to the side for most children. But not for Benny, of course. It was a fixation. He performed folk music with his father and grandfather every evening. It wasn't just enjoyable. It was training too. He discovered how to convey a message through music. Music's ability to communicate without words. Without polskas, schottisches, and waltzes, he could not perform music. Many years later, ABBA songs that packed venues would have the identical rhythms. However, at the time, he was only a young boy learning how to play music with those who were important to him. By the time he was 10, Benny was prepared to give up the harmonica. He felt at home when he discovered the piano. He only had the keys and spent hours trying various things until he got it right. He had no teachers or classes. He took notes while listening to the radio and modified them to suit his own style in order to learn to play by ear. He created his own rules instead of adhering to their. He spent hours each day playing the piano. His style evolved over time, including gospel, pop, and folk music. He picked up the ability to transition between musical genres with ease quite rapidly. That blend would be considered one of ABBA's hidden weapons. Songs like Dancing Queen have a distinct sound because Benny had to sort things out on his own at times. Most children were still trying to perform well on arithmetic tests at the age of 15. Benny dropped out of school. In 1961, he had a clear plan. It wasn't merely a dream to make music. There was no other option. He started performing at youth clubs, mostly in the suburbs of Stockholm. Although he wasn't yet well known, he was known. The manner he performed and maintained the audience's interest made it obvious that he was more than just a young man with a guitar. He gained popularity so fast that many local bands and artists soon realized who he was. It was risky. In those days, dropouts were not popular in Sweden. But safety didn't matter to Benny. He had a larger objective, and it was succeeding. Around this time, Benny also experienced something else that would alter him as much as music. He fell in love and became a father. He got to know vocalist Christina Grönvall. They clicked immediately, and they had a son named Peter by the time Benny was 17. 2 years later, Helene, a girl, was born. At the time, Benny was just a teenager. Though he was balancing practices and diapers, it was difficult for children his age to consider their futures. It wasn't easy. He had to take care of his family, pursue his aspirations, and work. But no stage could ever teach him the value of responsibility like those years did. One day, those emotions, pain, love, and guilt, would be incorporated into songs that brought tears to the eyes of millions of people. When everything changed, Benny Andersson was just 17 years old. The month was October 1964. He wasn't a star yet, though. At night, he performed music, but during the day, he continued to work in a bank. At that point, he caught the attention of Svenna Hedlund, the lead singer of the Hep Stars. As they performed together, he was astounded by Benny's organ prowess. Benny became an actual member of the Hep Stars a few days later. Even while the band was progressing on its own, Benny brought something special. Because of his instincts and classical influences, the group had a new sound. He didn't miss a beat as he added depth. Benny was at the heart of the band's rapid rise to fame in a matter of months. In March 1965, they took a significant step. At the time, they performed Cadillac on national television. More than 1 million episodes of the program Drop In were viewed by Swedes. For a nation with only 7 million citizens, that is a sizable population, 7,000,000. The enthusiasm, the self-assurance, and most importantly, Benny's electric organ playing astounded everyone. The band suddenly appeared everywhere. The Swedish Beatles were the name given to these lads. This modest child had become a teenage idol. Girls called his name. He was being pursued by photographers. Cadillac sold more than 80,000 copies, which was a significant quantity at the time when American and British bands controlled the market. Benny, however, wanted to create as much as he wanted to act. That same year, in the fall, he composed his first original song, No Response. It wasn't a hit, but it was a beginning. He subsequently penned Sunny Girl in 1966. After that, everything was different. It was a significant advancement rather than merely a hit. The song had a soft melancholy that was distinctly Swedish. For weeks, it remained at the top. Benny did not attend school to learn songwriting. By ear, he played it. Nevertheless, Sunny Girl sold over 50,000 copies and was played throughout Europe. Benny was at the forefront of Swedish pop, which had long been viewed as inferior, but now had international potential. Between 1964 and 1969, when the Hepstars were the top band in Swedish pop, Benny wrote several of their biggest hits. Songs like Wedding, Consolation, She Will Love You, and It's Nice to Be Back only performed well at the box office, but that is insufficient. The Swedish way of life included them. The complexity and emotional depth of Wedding made it stand out when it was released in 1966. She Will Love You and Consolation both made it into the top 5. It's Nice to Be Back was a hit song during the live performances. The majority of Swedish bands adopted British or American styles, but Benny created something original. By 1967, the Hepstars had sold over 400,000 albums in Sweden. Benny's tunes were the primary cause of that infrequent occurrence. On June 5, 1966, Andersson was touring with his band, the Hepstars. At the same time, 18-year-old Björn Ulvaeus was touring with the Hootenanny Singers. They met in the Slottsparken Park in Linköping in the afternoon. They grabbed guitars, took a seat on a bench, and began performing Beatles tunes. What started off as a straightforward jam session will permanently alter pop music. The result of that incident was the formation of ABBA, one of the most successful songwriting duos in music history, with over 400 million songs sold. You can still sit on the park bench and listen to ABBA music. Björn once remarked, "If we hadn't met here, my life would have been very different." Soon after their first meeting, they started writing music together. Their first collaboration was titled Isn't It Easy to Say? Although it wasn't a global hit, it was a significant song for them, and it was the Hepstars. It appeared on an album that peaked at number 12 in Sweden's charts. Their outstanding song demonstrated their individuality. It didn't end there. By the end of the 1960s, they were becoming more proficient at what they did and creating the sound that would eventually rule the world. They were penning tunes for other performers, but music was not the only thing on their minds. They were also thinking about business. Together with Stig Andersson, who would go on to become ABBA's manager, they founded Union Songs, a publishing house that granted them greater control over their music rights. At the time, artists rarely did that. It meant that when the large money came in, they didn't have to distribute it to outside corporations. Their songs were their responsibility. Over the ensuing decades, that decision would earn them millions of dollars and preserve their reputation. Then 1969 arrived. Hedge Clown is the song that Benny submitted to the Melody Festival in competition. It finished second in a tight vote, but something more significant happened that evening. Benny met young artist Annie Fridlingstead behind the scenes. Their relationship began after a few weeks. Their friendship swiftly blossomed from their shared love of music. She wasn't simply his girlfriend, though. She was going to be an ABBA vocalist. The group that would have a significant impact was completed thanks to the conference. In 1970, Benny and Björn released an album titled Laika, which translates to happiness. On one of the tracks, Hey Gamle Man, two of their girlfriends, Anna Frid and Agnetha Fältskog, contributed backup vocals. The song featured the first time all 4 of the future members of ABBA sang together, and it was a huge hit in Sweden, reaching number 5 on the charts and staying at the top of the radio charts for 5 weeks in a row. It was more than just a song, though. It was the beginning of something very big. A year later, in 1971, Stig Andersson gave Benny and Björn another chance, and they were hired by Polar Music as a result of his work, which gave them access to studios, allowed them to try new things, and gave them practical experience recording and arranging music. They were no longer just musicians. They were becoming filmmakers, and they used this time to practice and experiment with new sounds, which would later help shape ABBA's distinctive style. Then came April 6, 1974, when they performed Waterloo in Brighton, England, and the stage was lit up by their crazy costumes and energy. This song earned Swedes their first Eurovision victory, earning 6 points, selling nearly 6 million copies, and even reaching the US and Australian markets. However, there's a catch. Benny didn't actually witness that performance. He claimed in the years that followed that he didn't watch the entire video until decades after the fact, because his mind was too busy at the time to fully absorb it. Benny and Björn had a great time after that night. From Mamma Mia to Fernando and more, they wrote and recorded every single one of ABBA's songs between 1972 and 1982. Dancing Queen was their only #1 song in the United States, and it was #1 in over a dozen other countries as well. In 1976, Fernando sold over 6 million copies, and people all over the world sang these songs as themes, not just as pop hits. They knew how hard Benny worked on the songs for weeks until every note felt right, which is why the music is still good. But it was more than just the songs that made ABBA's sound so distinctive. He grew up listening to Swedish folk music, and he never stopped, fusing it with dance, American rock, British pop, and even rock, creating something new, something catchy but also emotional, joyful but depressing. Benny's ability as a songwriter and arranger contributed to creating a sound that was both new and classic, and as the band's popularity grew, they toured all over the world. However, Benny never cared about fame. He always focused more on the studio than the stage, and while he played piano and kept the music tight during shows, he continued writing even as he moved. It was uncommon to find that balance between creating new music and performing live. Many people choose one, then Benny did both. Over 385 million ABBA songs were sold over the years, but Benny never pursued fame. Instead, he pursued the sound. He was able to continue on his own terms even after the band ceased performing, thanks to the early choices he made, such as forming Union Songs and learning recording at Polar Studios. Benny Andersson and his band, the Hep Stars, were already well known in Sweden, and after winning a national singing competition, Anni-Frid Lyngstad, who everyone called Frida, became well known. Something clicked when their paths crossed. It was both creative and emotional, and they made their union last that same year. Benny started assisting Frida with her solo songs, and what started as a way to collaborate swiftly grew into something much bigger. When they moved in together in 1971, they were no longer just dating. Something was being built. Not just a life, but also a sound. And soon, the world would recognize that sound as ABBA. Björn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog joined them. Two couples make up one group. They really got along, both on and off stage. People really liked it. The pairs added heart to the catchy music. Benny and Frida were like fuel to the band's fans. They were married on October 6, 1978, after living together for nearly 9 years. By that time, ABBA was already well known throughout Europe, and songs like Dancing Queen and Take a Chance on Me were played on the radio. Their wedding wasn't just a private affair. It was news throughout Sweden. The ceremony was packed with paparazzi, and fans gathered outside to get a glimpse. But behind the scenes, things weren't so simple. Benny always felt more comfortable in the studio than in real life, which he later admitted was true. He was able to express himself more through song. Frida was easy to talk to, but Benny poured his thoughts into chords and melodies. Their love was real because of the music, not the talk. For a while, that worked. After the recording was finished, the distance became evident. Frida wanted to meet, and Benny frequently shut down when he wasn't in the studio. Over time, that emotional gap grew wider, and what had felt close started to feel lonely. Frida wanted love that was clear and honest, but Benny played chords instead. Their relationship gradually deteriorated, and they split up in late 1980. Their divorce in 1981 could not have come at a more telling time, as there would be no more ABBA. Their final studio album, The Visitors, was released that year and sounded different, worse and darker. Songs like One of Us and When All Is Said and Done were really depressing. They made people feel as though they were hearing not just the end of a band, but the end of 2 marriages. Some people consider that record to be a gem of pop music because of how real it felt. It was given life by Frida's divorce, but Benny had been fighting a different war in secret for years. alcohol. While everyone danced to ABBA's hits during their peak of fame, Benny continued to drink more and more because it gave him a way to escape the stress, the pain, and the mental weight of his marriage ending. He kept the show going with hit after hit, but he was dying inside. He expressed this more clearly later. He couldn't do anything without drinking. He knew he was in trouble at that point. It wasn't about going to parties. It was about getting through. He had to have it just to feel normal. He was afraid of that. But drug abuse was threatening to take it all away. Benny quit drinking in 2001, 20 years after The Winner Takes It All and other ABBA hits were popular in the UK. It was a completely different moment. The end of one book and the start of a new one. He got help, got through it, and stayed sober for a whole year. In 2011, he finally told everyone about his problem, and fans saw him for the first time, not just the artist. However, that wasn't the end of the story, though, because his son Ludwig also struggled with drugs. It broke my heart. Ludwig agreed that addiction can happen very quickly, especially if it runs in the family, and they broke the silence by being honest, allowing the world to see that even the best families can overcome this. Some people say that music can help you feel better, but for Benny Andersson and the rest of ABBA, it was often a way to hide. In 1980, Björn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Fältskog's marriage ended, but they didn't fight about it. It became a song that year, and after drinking, Björn wrote, "The winner takes it all." It wasn't about obtaining a divorce, he said. Nobody believed he was real. Agnetha was required to sing one of her songs. "Tell me, does she kiss like I used to kiss you?" It was a powerful message, according to Björn, who stated, "She sang it with such raw emotion that it made everyone in the studio cry." No conversation took place. They were able to express themselves verbally thanks to it. At the same time, when the wound was still open, Benny Andersson was going through his own breakup with Frida. They separated by 1981 after being together since 1969 and getting married in 1978. The song When All Is Said and Done was inspired by that suffering. Benny demonstrated how numb and exhausted she was after a relationship that had ended. He had no intention of making amends. His sole objective was to decipher the meaning of the silence. Frida sang the song despite experiencing the heartbreak it discussed. It sounded like a finality, but it was actually sidestepping the topic. One more toast for us, and then we'll pay the bill. Ultimately, Benny was honest. These songs weren't about processing emotions. Their goal was to escape from them. According to what he said, he turned to music as a method to escape and avoid dealing with the agony. As the band members' quiet gradually lengthened, he continued, "I put my best lines in songs, not to the people who needed to hear them." His piano told him what he couldn't say. The connections were breaking, despite the beautiful music. ABBA simply went away. They didn't go out. This narrative is about four people gradually drifting apart. There are no surprises or spectacular endings. Björn and Agnetha were no longer together. They had split up. The studio labor was heavy. It was called a brilliant death by Benny. Joy was gone. They persisted until 1982. By then, however, the spark had vanished. The renowned band ABBA was gradually disbanding. Everyone noticed a fantastic pop machine. In actuality, four weary individuals were depressed over an unchangeable circumstance. There was no stopping Benny. In 1983, he, Björn, and Tim Rice collaborated on the television program Chess. For 3 years, they diligently worked on a story that was based on a chess match between Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky and the tensions of the Cold War. There was more to it than theater. Politics, emotion, and plan were all set to music. One Night in Bangkok, despite being banned in Thailand due to its content, was a hit song around the world. I Know Him So Well. A duet between two ladies who adore the same man was the #1 single in the UK for 4 weeks in a row. In 1986, Chess opened in London's West End and ran there for 3 years. The end of ABBA, however, Benny had already moved on. Benny was doing well overseas, but he kept returning home. He returned to his origins in the 1990s. For 5 years, he and Björn worked on Kristina från Duvemåla. A family's journey to America in the 1800s is the subject of this musical, which is based on Swedish novels. On October 7, 1995, it made its debut in Malmö and performed 671 times throughout Sweden. Over 1 million people watched it. The cast record topped the charts for 74 weeks. On Swedish radio, The song Guldet Bliv till Sand set numerous records. According to some reviewers, Benny was more modern than Schubert. He gave up searching for hits. He was searching for purpose, memory, and history. Then the global stage returned. In 2009, Kirsten visited Carnegie Hall in New York. It took place at London's Royal Albert Hall the next year. The original star Helen Sjöholm performed once more, this time accompanied by Russell Watson, a British singer. There was a 50-piece orchestra behind them. They shared the Swedish tale with people worldwide. Even though the event was shortened to little under 4 hours, every minute mattered. The American designers didn't believe it would succeed. It was too long, too depressing, and too heavy. However, the audience cheered and stood up. Everyone found hearing about the immigration difficult. In the year 2001, Benny had a fresh idea. He founded Benny Andersson's Orchestra, BAO. On it, 16 performers performed. They were all among Sweden's finest. Some had a folk aesthetic, while others were traditional. Helen Sjöholm and Tom Kerberg joined as musicians. Their debut album topped the Swedish charts for 55 weeks. Every summer, BAO toured the entire nation. But it was more than simply shows. Ritual, community, and dancing were all present. It was like returning to Sweden. There was nothing innovative about Benny's music making. He used it as a means of returning home. Over time, Benny's ears also changed. Pop music fans who were excellent at creating it stopped listening to it altogether. Listening to Bach every night has become his new routine. There's something magical in it, greater than melody, he stated. In 2017, he released a solo piano album on Deutsche Grammophon. The life of Benny Andersson continued to go forward after he left ABBA. It actually became richer, deeper, and more significant in ways that few anticipated. In 1995, a really odd incident happened. The Swedish government appointed him a music professor. It was no ordinary phrase. One of the greatest honors in Swedish culture, it is typically bestowed for artists who have altered the perception of their work. Benny was one of those. However, that was only the beginning. 12 years later, he was admitted to the Royal Swedish Academy of Music in 2007. Some of Sweden's most intelligent musicians are part of the group, which has existed since 1771. Participating in it entitles one to a national prize. In 2008, he received an honorary doctorate from Stockholm University for more than just his pop successes. He received an award for assisting new musicians in discovering their voices and for preserving Swedish folk music. That first meant a lot coming from a man who as a youth played the organ in Stockholm churches. He had gone from tiny concerts to international renown, and now to the highest echelons of musical esteem. But Benny didn't keep that information to himself. By the late 1990s, he had witnessed the effects of celebrity. He was present. Expectations, anxiety, and the want to drink away the stress. He wished to save other aspiring artists the ordeal he had endured. He thus started mentoring aspiring artists. He had already established mono music in 1987, but it was more than a name. It became a haven for up-and-coming musicians and songwriters. In the center of Stockholm, on the island of Skeppsholmen, he opened his studio to a large number of people. There he taught them more than music. Instead of writing songs solely to reach the top of the charts, he discussed how to stay alive, keep grounded, and write songs from the heart. With his assistance, several of the most well-known figures in the region today got their start. The most revealing aspect of Benny's later years, however, may be the way he discusses his freedom. In a 2017 interview, he stated, "I'm freer now as a musician than I ever was in ABBA." He wrote some of the most well-known pop songs in the world. No more due dates, no more pressure to please everyone, just music, pure and personal, he said. He was not interested in becoming the center of attention. Rather, he pursued his passion. His plays, such as Kristina från Duvemåla, were inspired by Swedish history. He recorded an album titled Piano in 2017 that featured only the piano. No huge performance, no words, just him and a piano. Additionally, that unassuming little CD reached the top of the German and UK classical music charts. It reminded me that loud music isn't necessary to be heard.